well, I don't know what it is, but he said it twice. And Barrington is one of the members.
Anybody else?
You want to talk anything?
I just want to talk about a few things.
Sorry, I got your desk wet up here.
There's a lot
Sorry, I
of
got this
moving
all wet.
parts in
Yeah,
this,
that's okay, don't worry about that, just
program.
we'll take care of it.
and a lot of different organizations. One document they talk about is the plan to address health disparities and promote health equity in New Hampshire. And this is one of the programs that they're going to be implementing through this Granite State Future. And the one thing I want to point out is the New Hampshire Health and Equity Partnership. Not health equity, health and equity. Okay? What they talk about in this document is that other factors are now recognized as being equally, if not more important, in determining one's health and health status, including income, poverty status, education, employment, working conditions, housing quality, and environmental features, including access to healthy food choices, walkable streets, and safe neighborhoods. This complex array of social, cultural, and environmental factors that impact one's quality of life are called social determinants of health, and they contribute significantly to health disparities. So this so-called document about promoting health equity in New Hampshire is talking about social equity. They're talking about, one of the pages in this document talks about, and it quotes a quote from the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation, and it says, your zip code has more to do with your health than your genetics. So they're talking about zip code based, that because of your health, that there needs to be equal distribution of the poor around zip codes. That's what they're talking about in these documents. In this document, they talk about going into each town and getting much more data based on the spread of different environmental and social conditions. So they're going to do health, they call it a health survey, but they're taking data points of the different demographics, including race, and there's a bunch of other things, but race is a big thing in here, that they're going to look at the race composition of every town in New Hampshire. One of the partners is HEAL New Hampshire, and HEAL New Hampshire, Healthy Eating, Active Living. And then you say, well, where did HEAL come from? HEAL was formed in 2008, and it's an outcrop of an organization that was formed in the mid-2000s called the Convergence Partnership of the Tides Foundation. And according to the Convergence Foundation, it's the Kaiser Foundation, the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation, and a variety of what I would personally consider radical organizations got together to form the Convergence Foundation. And then they brought in an organization called PolicyLink to run the HEAL program. So PolicyLink was brought in to run this HEAL program. The HEAL program is now like in 17 locations, including HEAL New Hampshire. You go into PolicyLink and you look at their tax return, and their tax return says that they encouraged the Obama administration to implement the Sustainable Communities Initiative. So PolicyLink encouraged the Obama administration to start the Sustainable Communities Initiative. Now, one of their people is a guy named Dwayne Marsh. And Dwayne Marsh was one of their guys. He protested, or he helped organize the protests in Florida in the mid-2000s, where Florida did not give voting rights to felons. And they were protesting to re-enfranchise the felons in Florida. Dwayne Marsh was one of the organizers of that, that organization, organizing. And I just have to go through my documents. I get a lot of PolicyLink talks about equity, and they say equity, just and fair inclusion in equitable society is one in which all can participate and prosper. So all participate and prosper. The goals of equity must be to create conditions that allow all to reach their full potential. In short, equity creates a path from hope to change. Hope and change. This was written about a year before. One of the things they say, the HEAL, there's a big document, it's like that big, but the second page of that document promising strategies for creating healthy eating and active living on the second page. We are dedicated to encouraging environmental, policy practice, and organizational change with core values grounded in equity and social justice. So this is not land planning, this is social justice. This is one thing Dwayne Marsh talks about this was in 2007. It's inspiring to see so many folks ready, willing, and eager to fight for equality and equity for all Americans. The Step It Up 2007 initiative brought thousands together in solidarity for global warming legislation. The Facing Race Conference drew hundreds to New York to tackle head-on some of our most entrenched racial justice challenges. And it goes in talking about the re-enfranchising the convicted felons. My colleagues at Policy Link and I are honored and excited to be a new cog in this blog. In the coming weeks and months, we'll be back with some ideas on how smart public policy can create a more equitable nation. Dwayne Marsh was the head of policy creation at Policy Link. Dwayne Marsh is the guy who's the head of the Sustainable Communities Initiative and who we report to in the Sustainable Communities Initiative in New Hampshire. His name is right on there. Harry Deers from the National Regional Planning Commission signed it. His name is the Washington contact. Dwayne Marsh was brought in to help create the policies for the Sustainable Communities Initiative, and then he was hired as one of the senior advisors. So we are reporting to Dwayne Marsh. And when we had the difficulties in Windham, a letter was written, and the Regional Planning Commission says, we talked to Dwayne Marsh, and you don't have to worry about this, that, and the other thing. So Dwayne S. Marsh from Policy Link is now one of the heads of the Sustainable Communities Initiative. The overall head of the Sustainable Communities Initiative is a woman named Shelley Poticha, and in an interview in 2007, right when Obama got elected, before he was, so it was the end of 2007, she participated in a series called For the Greener Good by the American Planning and Building Association Museum. And her topic was divorcing your car. And she talked about how she was a planner for many years and then decided that she was an activist at heart. And in that seminar, one of the women on the stage, there was 3 people on the stage and an interviewer, one of the women on the car was the founder of Zipcar, which is started in Boston where you rent cars by the hour. Well, they talked about divorcing the car and not having the right to own a car. That you'll have a car in your neighborhood and you just go online and put in for the times that you want the cars. And Shelley Poticha thought that was a great idea. One of the things she said is she was an activist at heart and she thought it was a great idea. One guy got up, they said, any questions? And one guy got up, said, do you think Obama will have the guts to do proper gas policy, raise the gas taxes to the point where our gas costs as much as it is in Europe? Do you think he'll have the guts to do that? And so the woman from Zipcar said, well, that's a wonderful idea. Does anyone know Obama? We need to talk to him. And Shelley's like, that's a great idea. So you're talking about people who in their livelihoods have looked at policies that a lot of people in the mainstream would not think is mainstream, and they're running the Sustainable Communities Initiative. One of the things they talk about is livability. You'll hear all about livability. What are the livability principles? A livable community is one with multiple modes of transportation, different types of housing, destinations, located within an easy distance, 20 minutes by transit, 15 minutes by bike or foot, 10 minutes by car of the homes. And what they keep on talking about in these documents is concentrating all housing development within the town center, within 10 minutes of walking or biking to a transportation center or a designated hub. And then they talk about taxing anyone who tries to develop outside that radius. And they call it a greenhouse gas tax. So we said, well, that can't happen in New Hampshire. Well, one of the partners in here that's mentioned is the 2009 Governor's Climate Action Program. And that came out in March of 2009. Just thing I want to show you that in the Walkable Livable Communities Toolkit that just came out, given out by Hill, New Hampshire, and sent to all the planning boards, this is the ideal town. We have 3 to 4 stories with retail on the bottom, 3 or 4 stories of apartments and housing, you know, and that sprawl is bad, and should take all your centers and all your shopping malls and convert it to housing. And this is for New Hampshire. This is New Hampshire's vision. So, okay, sorry about that.
What happens if you don't have a town center?
You will.
You will.
They tried to give that to us once before, and we kept taking them out of our document.
Right.
We don't have a town center.
Right, but they're going to try to put it in. One thing they talk about is the governor's CAP plan, that they're going to implement the governor's CAP plan from 2009, the Transportation Land Use Plan. In the Transportation Land Use Plan, they talk about taxes, local gas taxes, state gas taxes. I just want to read from their document, because they talk about implementing this, and the implementation is, I can't find it right now, the implementation of local gas taxes, state gas taxes, what they call a registration tax. And the registration tax is to pay for local transportation. Now in New Hampshire, it's limited to $5 to put a local registration tax, but out in the western states, they have the same tax, and now it's up to about $100 per car. So we'll put a local registration tax on to pay for the local communities. One of the things they talk about is the fee-bait program. That if you have the nerve to buy a vehicle that doesn't get high gas mileage, you will have a fee of up to 5% of the manufactured suggested retail of the car when you register your car for the first time. And then those people who choose a vehicle with a higher gas mileage will get a partial rebate, and then the difference will be kept by the state to fund local transportation. The other thing they talk about is a greenhouse gas developer tax, where depending on how far you're away from the town center, you'll get a tax based on the greenhouse gas anticipated being generated from that property. And that was in March of 2009. And it was the New Hampshire governor's 2009 CAP document. But this big problem with that CAP document, that the scientific basis for the CAP document is based on the UN 2007 IPCC climate change document about how global warming is going to kill us all. Well, later on in 2009, it was revealed that some scientists fudged their numbers, and that they ignored significant data that refuted their findings. So in New Hampshire, we're using a document that has no flaws, with no flaws in the scientific documents, but New Hampshire and the Granite State Future has decided to continue, even though they know that document has flaws, even though they know that the science behind it. There's another woman that's mentioned, is in the reference material. She was called into question, and the Washington Post last year had an editorial about her questionable scientific data, and it said in there that she might not have falsified her data, she just kind of fudged it. So we have a situation where we're using a document that really does not have a valid scientific basis, yet we're taking that document and implementing greenhouse gas taxes and all kinds of taxes. Now, one thing I want to point out is this whole program is based on the New Hampshire Livability principles. Among them are efficient land use, which is restrictions on your land, compact design principles, mixed use, and mixed use is retail on the bottom, and on the top is residential, conserve working landscape, and that means restricting large areas of land in the rural areas. There's all kinds of things in here. Housing choices, including affordable housing options integrated throughout the whole community. So affordable housing in every zip code, in every area of every zip code. So there's all kinds of things. One thing, if you get a copy of the New Hampshire Livability Principles, think when you read this, New Hampshire Livability Principles versus Principles of Liberty. These are not principles of liberty. These are restricting individuals' right to own property and do with it reasonable use on their property. It's taking away the rights of people to use their land. I've heard horror stories where people have been on land for generations, and all of a sudden, due to all these regulations that are coming in, they can no longer use their property as the family had been using it for generations. So that's what you have to think about. The New Hampshire Livability Principles, when you read these, look at them carefully. A lot of these principles are in direct contrast to the principles of liberty and land rights. So.
Eileen, will you talk about water?
Orwellian, isn't it?
I guess. Oh, I'm sorry.
We talk about water.
Oh, there's a Water Sustainability Commission. The governor, do you want to tell the whole story? Okay. Water Sustainability Commission.
Yes, it's important because
Okay.
because they talk about consensus, and it's a
They talk about consensus, and one of the partners is NH Listens. And it's out of the Carsey Institute out of UNH. And the Carsey Institute was founded by the producer of Roseanne TV show. She's an alumnus of UNH. So Carsey Institute, a woman named Carsey, producer of Roseanne, donated $7 or $8 million to UNH to start the Carsey Institute. And part of their program is NH Listens, and they have listening sessions for different issues. Well, last April, the governor started a Water Sustainability Commission. And reading the documents associated with the Water Sustainability Commission, they actually say in their second meeting, we know what we need to do, we just have to find a way to do it. And they talk about seeing water as the collective, seeing water in the collective. And they talk about the problem of individual water rights. And they brought in a woman from Connecticut, and she talked about the collective. They also brought in a law firm to talk about New Hampshire riparian rights, the right for us to use our water on our property. And what they were talking about is how do we get around it. So they've had these public listening sessions. On May 8th, they had them in 5 different areas of the state. And it was advertised not very well. I found it on the internet by accident because I was dealing with the Windham sustainability and I was doing Google searches on sustainability. So I found it by accident. And it talked about a public listening session on water sustainability. I said, well, I think, I don't know anything about sustainability. I'm going to go to that. Well, I got there. There was supposedly 40 people from the public there. I was probably the only person from the general public there. There were water lobbyists and stakeholders everywhere in that room. Everybody knew each other. So the public meeting, well, they called it a public listening session. And as I'm sitting there in the little circles, they didn't do town meeting format, they did little circles.
Delphi.
No. What?
Delphi.
Well, see, I was a poli-sci major. They call that a Soviet. Because that's how the Soviet Union ran their government, in little listening circles. And what they do is they've decided what they want to do and make everybody agree to it. So, and somebody told me later on it was called Delphi, which was, it was started by the Rand Corporation or something. But I've known it as a Soviet. So they put me in a Soviet. And a guy came in, and he's the environmental reporter for National Public Radio in New Hampshire. And they said, you can't stay here if you want to report. If you want to stay here as a citizen, you can stay here, but this is not a public meeting. And you need to shut your equipment down if you want to stay. And the guy said, fine. And he sat down next to me. And I said, wait a minute, this is a public meeting. He has a report, And they said, oh no, you had to register. This is a private meeting. So the governor's so-called public meeting session was turned into a private meeting the second somebody tried to report on it. The rest of the night I was subjected to, they had something already printed out of what we wanted to do with our water, and I kept on saying, look, New Hampshire is the live free or die state. Live free or die, the #1 thing that makes us live is water. You can't take away our water rights. I said, our Constitution doesn't just say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It says life, liberty, and the pursuit and acquisition of property, in a word, I think it says, and in a manner, happiness. Well, they didn't want to hear that, so they were writing on a chalk, a little board, all our stuff, and about water rights, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the night, the woman rips off the thing, puts it to the side, she writes her own stuff, and tells me that's our report. Another section, they were having a lively discussion. They took all their stuff off the wall and put the papers away, and then somebody stood up and gave the report. One guy was so upset he walked out. So at the end of it, I said, look, you're having a stakeholders meeting and there's no real public here. I said, why didn't you tell the stakeholders that they couldn't be here because they're all stakeholders and not members of the general public? They said, well, they're also New Hampshire residents, so they're public too. So they basically are giving stakeholders 2 votes because they're going to get the public report and then they're going to get the stakeholders report. So
And
I
it,
will tell you that when the Water Sustainability Commission report comes out at the end of the summer, question everything that's in there, because there were no public meetings.
and it was not a consensus.
And it was not a consensus. They never took a vote. And when they didn't like what you were telling them, they changed the answers. So, you know, and I thought it was...
Are they looking to privatize the water rights?
What they're looking to do is collectivize it.
manage it.
Yeah. Manage and regulate.
That's kind of privatizing and having one management company oversee the whole water.
The government.
It's the government.
And
And
the,
actually, in the Granite State Future application, they say there's a problem in New Hampshire that only 64% of the people in New Hampshire have public water systems. And they saw that as a problem, that they want more water infrastructure.
So they can control it.
Yeah, they want to control the water. And it's very concerning because we had a farmer there and he was very concerned because his water was already being regulated. The withdrawal rates out of the river that he was there. But I'll tell you, the general public that was around me, I had the guy from NPR, I had a water lobbyist, I had 2 planners, a professor from the Carsey Institute, which I think they sent him over because before the meeting started, I was there early and I could hear the facilitator saying, if anybody gives you trouble, you know, just give me the eye signal and I'll send somebody over to help you. And sure enough, I think they realized I was going to be some difficult, cause some difficulties. So there were no people in the general public in that meeting that I could see. So.
one more thing to tie this together with the regional planning commissions is the person who runs the Rockingham Regional Planning Commission was a senior member
Of the Water Commission.
at that meeting.
Right. And one of the guys, the president of the Water Commission, received a large federal grant for a startup through the Energy Department. The cylinder loan program. His organization got one of the cylinder loan programs. And one of the things they're going to talk about is, one of the things I'm seeing in the documents, and I'm not absolutely sure what the actual thing will say, but there's going to be more restrictions on impervious asphalt laying around the state. And this guy happens to have a solar pervious paver that his startup makes. So you know,
Crony capitalism.
I can't say that for sure, but they talk about, you know, and they don't tell you straight out what they're going to do, but it looks like what they're going to talk about is that asphalt is bad and you need to put pervious surfaces.
Well, if there's no cars, it won't really matter, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
Go back to dirt roads and horse and buggy.
yeah, so,
Tell 'em.
do you have any question?
Tell them what they're doing in California.
Oh, in California, we saw a lecture. In California, there's a county that had over
1,384 miles of roads.
1,384 miles, and they've made the decision to tear up all but 162 miles, 170 miles of it.
Which county was that?
I forget what
I don't
county,
remember.
but what they're talking about is not just...
You're making a road agent cry.
No, I just think there's a lot of work.
Right. That what they're talking
Tear
about
up
is
the
that people really shouldn't live in the rural areas. So it belongs to the animals, and actually, we went, yeah. You have a
Have either
question?
one of you folks heard of the Portland project?
No.
They're doing this in Portland. It was
Oh,
a
yes.
pilot for this whole thing, and it started in 2003.
Mhm.
They tried this in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's different, a lot of...
Oh, yeah. It's a town that's now, I think we saw that.
It's
Yeah.
hemmed in, and you should be able to
They're
get
they're
exactly
starving.
where this is going to go based on what they've done.
They're starving, right? They're starving. All the businesses left.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. Did you want to address us still?
Still have to contribute.
Contribute?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is all great information. This is kind of a live free or die town, so
Oh, okay.
feel right at home.
Dying slowly.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome. My name is Lou Vita, and I'm a state representative. I represent Stratford County District 3, which is the towns of Barrington, Milton, Middleton, Stratford, New Durham, and what am I missing? Farmington. There we go. I never did all 6 But anyway, okay, just a bit of background. I'm a graduate chemical engineer. I worked for 40 years in New Jersey, and before coming up here to retire. And my background is essentially engineering, power plant engineering, instrument engineering. My last job was with the U.S. Army RDEC at Picatinny Arsenal in Dover, New Jersey, where we did shelf life and equipment longevity studies on munitions and weapon systems. So I came up here and got involved in politics a little bit. Was the moderator in Middleton for 3 years, and then spent 3 years on the town, on the Board of Selectmen. And felt maybe we could do something a little bit more, and my wife and I both ran and are currently on the, in the House. And we will not be running again in November. The redistricting did us in. So, in the 4 years that my wife has been in there, in my 2 years, we had a chance to try to submit some bills to hopefully right a couple of wrongs. One of the bills was to give direction to the U.S. Congress to adhere to the Constitution in terms of what's called congressional oversight. For those of you who are not familiar with it, congressional oversight is when you have a commitment or an agreement or a treaty with another country or a supranational, not supernatural, but a supranational body, such as NAU, NAFTA, the UN, and that treaty requires a 2/3 vote of the Senate, confirming vote of the Senate, before the treaty can be approved. Back in '74, the Congress saw fit to change that. They put in something that's called fast track. Fast track doesn't require this anymore. It didn't change the Constitution. Essentially, operating in violation of the Constitution since 1974. And the agreements that I mentioned earlier, NAFTA, NAU, the Security and Prosperity Partnership, all these great things that are going on between Mexico, Canada, and America, are all illegal. They do not conform to the Constitution. In fact, in the year 1999, the 106th Congress, on a single gavel vote of the chair, put into effect 34 agreements with other countries and other organizations without even a voice vote, just a travel stroke. Little or no public notice and no vote. This is what we're faced with, and because of that exposure to what was going on, we sort of became more intensely aware of the UN and what it's trying to do to normalize the entire North American continent. By normalize means lower to the lowest possible standard, so that Mexico and the US and Canada all operate on the same, essentially off the same data plane. We're looking at such things as normalization of ports of entry rules, relaxation of countries of origin of outside products, all sorts of good stuff. Anyway, because of my familiarity, or our familiarity, with the UN and its initiatives to try to bring us into their essentially a global economy and a global government, when we heard of ICLEI, which is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, this is essentially what Ken's been talking about, we became a little bit disturbed, looked into it, and found out that it is a direct threat to the sovereignty of the state of New Hampshire and to the municipalities in the state of New Hampshire. Remember that this is a local sovereignty state. All power comes from the towns and the municipalities. We give that power to the state government by means of our legislators, and the state government in turn conveys power to the federal government, along with other states. So So this is a home rule state. Well, what I saw in Italy